Hey everyone, and welcome to the Knowledge Notebook channel. Today, we are diving deep into something we all think we know, Halloween. But I promise you, behind the superhero costumes and the mountains of candy, there's a wild history of ancient spirits, holy vigils, and, get this, a guy who actually tricked the devil. Let's get into it.
So picture this. It's October 31st. The streets are buzzing with little ghosts and goblins, everyone's on a sugar high, and spooky decorations are everywhere. It's awesome, right? But have you ever just stopped, looked at this wonderfully weird tradition, and asked yourself, why? Why do we do this? Why carve faces into giant orange vegetables? Why dress up and demand treats from our neighbors? Well, the real story is way more fascinating than you might think.
You see, the history of Halloween isn't some straight line you can trace on a map. It's more like a historical mystery, a tangled web of ancient folk traditions and much later religious practices. In fact, historians are actually pretty divided on where it all truly began, which leaves us with two major competing theories about its origins.
Okay, so here are the two big ideas. On one side, you've got the theory that Halloween is a direct descendant of a really old pre-Christian Gaelic festival called Samhain. And on the other side, there's the argument that no, it's a purely Christian holiday that popped up all on its own. So which is it, a pagan party or a holy night of prayer? Let's play detective and look at the evidence for both, starting with the ancient Celts.
To do this, we need to wind the clock way, way back, long before jack-o'-lanterns, before trick-or-treating, to medieval Ireland and Scotland. Because it's here we find a festival that feels both incredibly ancient and, honestly, surprisingly familiar. It was called Samhain.
So what exactly was Samhain? Well, for the Gaelic peoples, it was one of the most important moments of the year, celebrated right around November 1st. It marked the final harvest, the end of summer, and the official start of the long, cold winter. But for them, this wasn't just a simple change in the weather. It was a deep, symbolic shift into the darker, more mysterious half of the year.
And here's where it gets really spooky. The absolute core belief of Samhain was that this was a liminal time. That's a fancy word for a time when the veil, the boundary between our world and the spirit world, became paper thin. This meant that spirits, fairies, and even the souls of the dead could just walk right over into our world. To keep things peaceful, people would leave out offerings of food and drink to appease these supernatural visitors, and they'd light these massive bonfires for protection. Leaving out food for spirits sound a little familiar?
But hold on, because those pagan bonfires are only half of the story. The other big theory argues that all the clues we need to understand Halloween's origins aren't buried in ancient folklore, they're actually hiding in plain sight, right there in the name itself.
Yeah, the word Halloween has literally zero to do with Samhain. It's a Scottish term. See, hallow is just an old word for a holy person, a saint. So All Hallows Day was just another name for All Saints' Day, which is a major Christian feast day. The night before it was called All Hallows' Eve, and over time, in Scotland, that got smushed together to become Halloween.
And this All Hallows' Eve wasn't just a standalone thing. It was the kickoff to a 3-day observance called All Hallowtide. It began on October 31st with a night of vigil and prayer. That was followed by All Saints' Day on November 1st, and it all wrapped up with All Souls' Day on November 2nd. The entire 3-day period was dedicated to remembering the dead, saints, martyrs, and all of your departed loved ones. So you can definitely see how the themes start to overlap, right?
So, where does that leave us? Was it the pagans or the Christians? Well, the truth is, it's probably not an either-or situation. What most likely happened is a classic case of cultural blending. As Christianity spread through Gallic lands, the official holy days of All Hallowtide started to merge with the powerful, pre-existing folk customs of Samhain, and over centuries, they created this unique, amazing hybrid that would eventually become the Halloween we know.
And you can see this beautiful mashup happening in pretty much all of our modern traditions. Let's take trick-or-treating. It has really clear roots in a Christian practice called souling, where the poor would go door to door, offering prayers for the dead in exchange for little cakes. Later, in Scotland and Ireland, that morphed into guising, where people, often kids, would put on costumes and perform a little song or a poem for a treat. And the phrase trick-or-treat itself, that's way more recent. It didn't show up in print until 1927 in Canada.
All right, but what about the most famous symbol of all? The big, glowing face of Halloween, the jack-o'-lantern. Well, its story doesn't start with a pumpkin. It starts with a very clever but very doomed man and a hot piece of coal straight from the fires of hell.
The legend is all about a guy named Stingy Jack.
He was a trickster who managed to fool the devil himself, not once but multiple times. When Jack finally died, he was way too sinful to get into heaven. But the devil, having promised never to take Jack's soul, also turned him away from the gates of hell. So, Jack was doomed to just wander in the eternal darkness between worlds with only a single burning coal from hell to light his way, which he placed inside a turnip he'd carved out.
And so, this figure, Jack of the Lantern, became a famous character in folklore, a restless, wandering soul. And people in Ireland and Scotland started carving their own spooky lanterns, usually with monstrous faces, to scare away Stingy Jack and any other evil spirits that might be roaming around on Halloween night. So if the story is about a turnip, why do we use pumpkins? Well, when Irish and Scottish immigrants brought this awesome tradition with them to America, they found the native pumpkin. And it turns out pumpkins are way bigger, much softer, and a whole lot easier to carve than a tough old turnip. The new and improved tradition took off, and the pumpkin became the official face of Halloween.
And this whole reinvention of the jack-o'-lantern was just one part of a much bigger story, the incredible transformation of Halloween, from a regional folk holiday into a massive American cultural phenomenon.
The huge waves of immigration during the 19th century were what carried these rich, spooky traditions across the Atlantic. At first, Halloween was really only celebrated inside these immigrant communities. But by the early 20th century, its appeal was just too much to resist, and it was adopted into mainstream American culture. And along the way, it became less about appeasing ancient spirits and more about community get-togethers, fun costumes, and playing pranks.
And when I say America adopted it, I mean it really adopted it. Today, Halloween is an absolute commercial juggernaut. Just get a load of this number. In 2023, Americans were projected to spend a mind-blowing $12.2 billion on this one holiday.
And look at where all that money is going. It's split almost perfectly between costumes, decorations, and of course, candy. We've gone from leaving out a turnip to ward off one lost soul to spending billions on animatronic lawn decorations and movie-quality costumes. It's a pretty incredible shift from a night of deep spiritual meaning to a massive economic event.
So when you really step back and look at the whole picture, the story of Halloween is one of constant, incredible reinvention. It's this amazing holiday that has absorbed beliefs from Gaelic folklore, folded in traditions from Christian observances, and then got supercharged by American commercial culture. It has changed its mask over and over again, from a sacred night about spirits to a secular night of pure fun. Which really just leaves us with one final fascinating question. This holiday has journeyed from a time of appeasing spirits to honoring saints to becoming a multi-billion-dollar shopping season. Given its incredible history of always changing, you really have to wonder, what will Halloween even look like 100 years from now? Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this deep dive, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel, The Knowledge Notebook, for more videos just like this one.